to talk about actually managing the business. We want our senior leaders to be managing product and managing customers. And I think as you get bigger and you put more and more layers into your company, it's all too frequent that you start managing math. You start managing ratios and percentages and growth. And I think it's a real disease if you stray away from really focusing in a deep way on the product you're building and in a deep way on what your customers are telling you. And so we try and organize, both with our org structure as well as just with our culture and what we choose to focus on really making sure that everybody is thinking about one or both of those two things, product and customers. And if you keep even the most senior leaders engaged at that level, then all of a sudden you maintain the urgency and you keep acting like an insurgent. We got to feel that urgency every day.
So keep acting like an insurgent. That's the motto.
Absolutely, and structure yourself and build a culture that allows you to. It's one thing to say it, but it's easy to say it, but it's much harder to put in place enabling mechanisms that enable you to do so. And we focus a lot of effort on those mechanisms.
Now, do you think the cloud keeps getting bigger and that AWS and Microsoft and Google just get bigger pieces of an ever-expanding pie? Or at some point, does it become a zero-sum game and that fight for market share becomes more brutal and more bloody?
Well, I mean, this is a very large market segment. And if you look at global IT spend, it's in the trillions of dollars. I've seen estimates like $3 trillion. It doesn't really matter how many trillions it is. It's very, very large. And we've always believed that this was too good a market segment opportunity for there really to only be one winner. And sure enough, you've seen robust competition emerge, and we all compete vigorously. But the segment is just growing so rapidly that I think really for us, we believe that the winning business strategy for a long time to come, and I would maintain forever, is to focus not on the competitors, but to focus maniacally on customers and wake up every day understanding exactly what it is that they need us to build next, and then work backwards from there, back internally to how can we build those things. And if we do the best job at building the most quickly the things that are most important for our customers, then I'm really not worried about what the competitors will do.
You worked 10 feet away from Andy Jassy in the early days. Tell us something about the Amazon CEO that no one knows but you.
As financial trading has evolved, so too have societies. Technology has always been at the heart of this transformation. But today, Capital.com is pioneering a new trading evolution. With lightning-fast execution speeds, competitive spreads, and world-leading support and training courses, times have changed. Welcome to Capital.com. Welcome to the future of trading.
You're going to get me in trouble, aren't you?
You worked 10 feet away from Andy Jassy in the early days. Tell us something about the Amazon CEO that no one knows but you.
You're going to get me in trouble, aren't you? I grew up in Seattle, and Andy, coming from New York, has this fascination I don't understand with New York sports teams. So I've had to endure that for a lot of years. New Yorkers, yeah. So what are you going to do? Although he's I think come to adopt some of the Seattle teams, particularly the new hockey team, the Kraken here.
As he should.
As he should, exactly.
So how do you expect Andy will be different from Jeff? Or how has Andy already been different from Jeff?
Well, I think we're all different as leaders. I think it's all important that it's important that we all bring our own stamp to it and operate within ourselves. I don't think I would be a very good Andy. I don't want to presume, but I would assume that Andy wouldn't be a great Jeff, because Jeff's Jeff, Andy's Andy, and I'm me. So I think that Andy will certainly bring a great depth of experience from AWS, which is one important part of the business, and having operated that business for so long, and I expect that'll also give him an opportunity. Although he was involved in other parts of Amazon, certainly for a number of years, we'll be able to bring a fresh perspective to the whole company, just as I hope to bring to AWS. And I think that fresh perspective is often helpful. I think just the mere act of change is useful for the business, for customers, for employees, and just to shake things up a little bit. So I think just a fresh perspective.
How will you be different from Andy?
Well, I think that the world around us is changing so much that we're going to have to be different. It doesn't matter what we did yesterday. And right after I joined, we actually added 2 new leadership principles, which is very exciting. One's around striving to be Earth's best employer, and the second around focusing on the fact that success and scale bring broad responsibility. And those are things about which I personally am very passionate. And so I really personally look forward to digging in and helping the company to figure out what are those things that we have to figure out. Where can we innovate to be Earth's best employer? And then also to figure out externally, what can we do to really be great citizens of our local communities, to be great citizens of our national communities, and to be great citizens of the global community. And I care a lot about those things, as a lot of other people do here, but I plan to put a good amount of energy and time and focus, and hopefully help Amazon innovate in all of those areas.
How closely do you work with Andy day to day? Does he, regularly weigh in on AWS decisions or not?
Well, he's got a pretty broad scope of things to worry about now. So he's got a pretty intense day job, I believe. So he's really focused across the company, as you would expect him to be. But that being said, obviously AWS remains an important part of Amazon, and so we touch base regularly, be it in person or via email, just on the most important things going on in the business.
Does Jeff ever weigh in on AWS decisions?
Yes, I mean, really from the beginning. Jeff was involved at the very, very beginning at some of the most fundamental decisions. How do you price EC2? What do you name S3? What does the detail page look like? Obviously, over time, the business grew, and but Jeff was always available when we needed him, and I certainly anticipate that'll be the same going forward.
So is he still available now? And what do you understand that Jeff's priorities are?
Sure. Well, I'll let Jeff speak to his own priorities, but certainly Jeff has been available when, for example, we've been doing our annual planning cycle, as many companies have, and it's been great to have Jeff weigh in on really where we're heading for the next year and beyond, and to just make sure it's easy to get focused on the details of the business, and it's great to have multiple people who can help you pick your eyes up a little bit.
Now, you joined AWS in the middle of a pandemic. You came back to AWS in the middle of a pandemic. That's hopefully moving into the rearview mirror. Moderna is one of AWS's biggest customers. If it weren't for the cloud, if it weren't for AWS, would we have had a vaccine as quickly as we did?
I've got to tell you, Emily, it's been an absolute privilege for us to work with Moderna, because what they're doing obviously is literally life-saving, and they've been so innovative and so creative. So Moderna took a drug development process to get to a vaccine candidate. That process would typically have taken them 20 months. And doing that on AWS in conjunction with all the innovation on their side, reduced that 20 months to 42 days. 42 days to get the vaccine candidate, the mRNA vaccine candidate for COVID-19. And that was really running multiple parts of Moderna on AWS. So if you look at the drug design part, they had their drug design studio running on AWS, all the way to manufacturing with the new digitized manufacturing that they call their digital manufacturing platform. So it's really end-to-end, and the ability to use massive amounts of resources and to pick the exact type of service and capability for each part of the job, and to really bring the full set of resources to bear. In addition to not having to focus on the IT and the infrastructure and the technology, and rather letting Moderna focus on the all-important job of drug discovery. So working in partnership, it was just magnificent to see what they accomplished.
Since you joined AWS, a number of longtime AWS leaders have moved on to Microsoft, to Stripe, to Tableau. Does that concern you?
Well, actually, retention has been very good. If you mentioned the senior leaders, if you look at the VP plus ranks, the VP and above ranks at Amazon, the average tenure is over a decade, over 10 years. So that's actually very, very strong retention. So of course, you're always going to have some level of people coming and people going, and at the end of the day, that's actually healthy for the business. You want new perspectives to come in, of course, in the right proportion.
Amazon has opened an investigation after 550 employees supported a petition claiming a culture of discrimination, harassment, bullying, and bias. What's the status of this?
Well, we are incredibly focused, and I personally believe it's incredibly important to really have a very diverse, inclusive and equitable environment. And we're going to make sure that whatever it takes, that we've got that. So we believe that we're really doing a lot of things to deliver on that. And we've got a lot of innovative efforts around bringing in a diverse workforce, which we have to have, both because we're going to serve our customers best. They're diverse. We have to match that diversity. And also, I just believe it's our responsibility and it's the right thing to do. Anytime there is any possibility that things are not, something has not gone the way we want it to, we're going to investigate it thoroughly. That's what we're in the middle of doing in this case, and we'll make sure that we're operating in a way that's consistent with our values, and that's always the only goal.
If you could rewind to the early 2000s, the earliest days of AWS, is there anything you would have done differently to build an inclusive culture, to start with a more inclusive culture, to make sure that it didn't become a boys' club?
Well, I don't think that's what we have. Mm-hmm. I think that we do have a really fun, exciting, innovation-led, and inclusive culture. And that being said, these are hard problems. I think we've done a lot, but we are nowhere close to where we need to be. We're going to be restless and dissatisfied with our progress on DE&I, just as we are with every other part of our business.
Mark Zuckerberg.
What do you think is happening in the blockchain industry right now?
I think in the long run, DeFi wins. DeFi wins because it's a better system. It's composable, it's transparent, it's cheaper because you're just code. You don't have all these people in this legacy infrastructure.
Is making a big bet on the metaverse. How big do you think it's going to be?
It's such an interesting sentence. The metaverse is real.
AWS has the biggest trove of sensitive corporate data in the world. I'm curious how you think about the balance between data and privacy and freedom and civil liberties in the modern era. I mean, there are governments, there are nation states around the world that want that information. Hackers and criminals want that information.
Well, we're very clear to start with that our first job is security. We often say security is job zero. It was on the first page of our operating plan pretty much every year that I can remember.
But what about when governments request that information?
So,
or subpoena that information?
Sure. Well, we are very clear that our customers' data is their data. So the data belongs to our customers, and not everybody operates that way. We are not going to look at customers' data. We are not going to compete against our customers using their data. Their data is their data. And furthermore, we have all sorts of architectural best practices that our customers should be and are using for any sensitive data. And so a lot of that really relies around encryption. And so we built a lot of different encryption capabilities so that any sensitive data, which could leak for any reason, be it to a government, be it to a hacker, be it to anyone else, any form of security breach, that it's encrypted and useless to anybody else. Given the broad array of encryption solutions that we provide, it's actually very doable and powerful for our customers to safeguard their data that way.
Mark Zuckerberg is making a big bet on the metaverse. Is AWS going to have a role in the metaverse?
I think AWS already has a big role in the metaverse. So I think the cloud enables the metaverse. So if you think about all of the compute capacity, all of the storage, all of the machine learning which is required to create compelling and delightful end user experiences in the metaverse, a lot of that is already today running on AWS. So if you take Epic Games, for example, so Epic runs Fortnite, massively popular game, 350 million users worldwide, and Epic runs almost everything on AWS, from the back-end servers to the analytics and everything in between. So I think that's a great example of the metaverse at work, and all that's happening today on AWS. And we anticipate that's only going to grow really rapidly in the future.
How big do you think it's going to be?
It's such an interesting sentence. The metaverse is real, and yet it's virtual at the same time. I think that if we continue to do what we've always done, which is to provide a technology platform that allows organizations to transform, then these gaming and entertainment and social media and other companies will be able to do what they do best, which is to focus on innovating on behalf of their end users. And I think that the metaverse and many other areas will be rich with invention.
So this next conversation will happen in the spheres, in the metaverse. That's where we'll next meet.
That could be. I'll meet you in the metaverse.
All right, see you there. Now, I know that climate change, and stopping climate change, and your data center footprint is a big passion of yours. How fast will Amazon's data centers get to carbon neutral?
Amazon is already the largest purchaser of renewable energy in the world. And we intend to be 100% renewable energy by the year 2025. We had originally said 2030. We actually accelerated that by 5 years to 2025. And that's part of our broader climate pledge that Amazon created, and to which we've now gotten 200 other organizations to sign on to. And the climate pledge is to be net zero carbon by 2040, 10 years ahead of the Paris Accord target. Yeah. So we know how to do some of that. Other part are going to require invention, but we really look forward to it, and I think it's one of the most important things we can do for our generation.
Amazon counts some of the biggest oil and gas producers as its customers. Isn't that a contradiction? Should you be kicking them off your platforms?
Those customers are trying to get to sustainable business models which rely on new energy sources. And so many of those customers are figuring out how do they get to wind, how do they get to solar, how do they get into batteries, all new business models relying on renewable energy. And I think rather than abandoning them and having them maybe dig in more on fossil fuels, if we can enable them to move faster, to be more innovative, and to be more agile in figuring out new business models, new technical solutions, experimenting, failing fast, and moving on to the next idea, then the whole world will get to the renewable energy solutions that we need.
At this year's reInvent conference, it'll be the first time that Andy Jassy is not giving the keynote. You will be. Give us a preview. What can we expect to hear?
I think we're going to have a lot of really exciting announcements. So I think across our service portfolio, you'll see that. We have a lot of exciting partner announcements. Partner ecosystem still remains to this day so important to what AWS is doing, and we have some great announcements lined up for that. And then I think people are going to want to see that we're making it easier and easier for them to consume the cloud and to work with AWS. And so we're going to continue to, in addition to building more powerful basic capabilities, we're going to continue to make it easier and easier in a variety of ways to interact with AWS.
Adam Selipsky, CEO of AWS, thank you so much for joining us.
Bloomberg has enhanced search on the terminal to deliver what you need when you need it. Now, you can simply type phrases in everyday English in the command line. Compare financials. Find people. Analyze markets. You can enter phrases or ask questions. What do you want to know today? Ask a question or visit SearchGo to find answers now.
So here we are, one of the elephants.
Since this very first YouTube video was uploaded 16 years ago, the world's most popular video network has exploded to more than 2 billion users in the farthest corners of the planet, now raking in billions of dollars every year. It's evolved a long way from cat videos to become a one-click journey to the center of the zeitgeist, pop culture, and kid culture, amplifying some of the brightest and sometimes darkest traits in all of us. While YouTube has elevated a generation of creators and educated and entertained generations of viewers, it's fought misinformation, terrorism, racism, and violence many clicks along the way. Lately, YouTube's biggest battles are focused on eliminating COVID and vaccine misinformation and keeping the platform safe for kids and teens. On this edition of Bloomberg Studio 1.0, we rewind to talk about where YouTube has been and fast forward to where it's going next with one of the longest tenured employees and women at Google, the CEO of YouTube, Susan Wojcicki.
It's been 5 years since we last talked on camera. Yes. And we have a new president. We are weathering a pandemic. The most watched video on YouTube is
Baby Shark.
Baby Shark. So a lot's changed since 2016. How do you feel about YouTube 2021 versus 2016?
I feel good about it. It's definitely been a while, and in technology, things move so quickly. So a lot of things have changed since 2016. And I mean, overall, I've been really pleased that we've continued to grow our ecosystem of creators. We've invested a lot in responsibility, and that's been a really big focus for us. And we've weathered through a pandemic and a lot of hard challenges, but overall, I'm feeling really good.
You've been at Google for 20 plus years, going all the way back to Larry and Sergey in the garage. You've been the CEO of YouTube for 7+ years. Mm-hmm. How has your job changed in that time?
Since I joined being the CEO of YouTube, I would say one of the biggest things that has changed certainly has just been maybe the recognition of the importance of digital video. So when I first joined, actually a lot of people would say, oh, like, why did you join? I was running ads beforehand, and that's been the main way Google generates revenue. And so a lot of people said, like, why did you leave that and go to YouTube? But I always believed in digital video. And I believe that now we see that the world also believes. We've seen a lot of adoption of digital video and the benefits that that can have.
You've championed this diversification strategy at YouTube since you started. What's working and what's not working?
Well, our main way of generating revenue is from advertising, but we also have really grown our subscription revenue, and that has been really, really important for many different reasons. So that has enabled our users to have an experience where they can have music, YouTube Music and Premium. We just announced the 50 million subscribers that we were really excited about. But we also see other ways that our creators generate revenue. So our creators, for example, generate revenue with channel subscriptions. They may sell merchandise. We also have things like digital goods, so like Super Chat, Super Thanks. And so we've basically diversified the number of ways that our ecosystem is generating revenue.
The original tagline for YouTube was broadcast yourself, and that concept has exploded. You have ordinary people in the spotlight. When they grow up, they want to be an influencer. They want to be a YouTube star or a YouTube creator. What do you see as the future of the creator economy?
I see a lot of possibility with the creator economy, and because I see that many people have a lot of interest and they have a lot to offer, and beforehand they wouldn't have been able to have shared that with the world. And so there's so many people, depending upon what their talent or their interest is, whether it's a sport or cooking or gaming or hairstyles, that people have come out and really been able to share that and create a lot of jobs. So we actually see we actually saw a 35% increase in the number of creators that are generating six-figure income out of YouTube and in the last year. And so that's just an example of like how the creator economy is continuing to grow.
Well, and for years, YouTube was the only company that actually paid creators. But now a lot of companies are paying creators. You know, Facebook and Instagram, Snap, TikTok. How do you see that competition playing out? Who wins?
Well, it is a competitive landscape, and in general, competition's good. It makes everyone work harder, and that's good. I mean, we look at creators and we say they're going to come to us if we do the best job. And creators come to us looking basically for fame and fortune. Like, how can I have a skill or I have a talent, something I want to share with the world, and YouTube can help that be known, can help them provide that fame, but also we can generate revenue for them. And so as long as we're doing a good job of that, creators are going to come to us. If we start to fail, then they're going to leave us and they're going to go to another platform. And so we just need to work really hard to make sure that we deliver that for our creators.
A year ago during the Black Lives Matter protest, YouTube made big commitments to Black creators in particular. What's been the progress there? And how do you see YouTube, the potential for YouTube to be used as a tool for social justice?
Well, so we made an announcement that we were going to do a $100 million Black Voices Fund. And so we're continuing to develop content there. But one of the other things, and I think there's been a lot of great content that's come out, and we'll certainly see more. But because YouTube doesn't have any gatekeepers, like you can just post and become a creator. We have seen a lot of people of different backgrounds and underrepresented backgrounds become creators and have audiences. We never really measured it beforehand because we didn't have a way. And so one of the things that we've done is we've enabled creators to now tell us what backgrounds they they affiliate with, so we can have a better understanding of how they're doing on our platform.
Let's talk about YouTube Shorts. It seems to be a top priority.
Yeah.
We all know that TikTok is on the rise.
Yeah.
How important are YouTube Shorts to the platform, to the company?
So YouTube Shorts is very important. We see that creators and users want to watch all types of content, long form, short form. It turns out that the first video that was actually ever uploaded to YouTube, Me at the Zoo, was an 18-second video. So it was a short form video. And we have lots of short form videos, and we've had it way before TikTok did. But what we have really been leaning into more is just enabling those to be found. And then a lot of the creation tools. And so bringing a lot more mobile creation is really important for us going forward.
Did you notice that viewing time was being lost to TikTok? Did you see that trend? And do you see TikTok as a sort of existential threat?
I mean, we definitely see many competitors in this space. What we're just focused on are like our own metrics, like do we see our users engaging? Where's our opportunity? And we're always looking around and seeing what our competitors are doing. And if they're doing something that we think would be good for our users and our creators, we're also going to look at how we can improve our own economy, creator economy, and what's good for our users.
I think a lot of people, we talk about vaccine hesitancy and they blame social media. They say YouTube's not doing enough.
One of the big things for us is to continue to work with public health experts to get their messages across.
Today's your big day. Are you excited?
Mama is tired.
6 feet apart.
You have to feed your creativity.
Built this tree house.
You guys ready for the movie?
See what we can do.
At this point, YouTube has become a hub for discovery, for information, for, it satisfies our curiosities, right? That comes with a lot of inspiration, but also with misinformation. When it comes to vaccines, vaccine hesitancy, videos that cause a public health risk, where do you want to see YouTube do better?
We've taken responsibility very seriously. It's been one of my top priorities. So first of all, we want to make sure that if there's information that violates our policies, we came up with 10 different policies around COVID. Then if that's a violation of policies, then that's something that we'll remove. We removed over 1 million videos associated with COVID, but we also want to make sure that we're raising up information that we think that come from trusted and authoritative sources. And we've really been able to do that.
I think a lot of people, we talk about vaccine hesitancy and they blame social media. They say YouTube's not doing enough. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, first of all, we're always learning. Just to be fair, we're always thinking about how can we do better. We're looking at the feedback and working with public health experts across the board. And, I think one of the big things for us is to continue to work with public health experts to understand, what are the ways that we can partner with them to get their messages across. And I really believe that is something that's really changed is the evolution of bringing creators, musicians, experts talking about public health. We never would have seen that before the pandemic.
How much do you internalize the criticism of YouTube's content? Do you take it personally? And how does that influence the decisions that you make as CEO?
I want to be doing the right thing. And I care about that. I care about the legacy that we leave. I care about the world that we leave to our children. I care about how media is consumed by the next generation and by everyone today. And so I really have put a lot of time and effort to make sure that we are acting responsibly. And there's always a balance between the free speech and the but being responsible and taking down content that we think could lead to some kind of real world harm. And so, sure, I think whenever you're in a position like that, there's going to be a lot of criticism. But our goal is just to continue to talk to experts and evolve.
And how do you make decisions in those tough moments where it's a tough call? Like, how much of it is making a decision or leading by consensus, and how much does it come down to you?
The goal is that when we have tough decisions, they are like improvising in some way. Like, we've made a concrete set of decisions beforehand, and then we're looking and saying, is this something that meets our standards? Is it a violation or not a violation? And if it seems like there's some set of issues with the content that we have on the platform, we're going to go back to experts and then reevaluate. Should we be making changes to our policies?
YouTube helped keep a generation of children connected, educated, entertained, distracted through the pandemic. What have you learned from that experience, and what do you see as the potential future of YouTube as a tool for learning, as a tool in schools?
When I meet people and they find out I'm the CEO of YouTube, almost always they tell me about something they learned on YouTube or something their family member learned. So I see that as being a very significant part of YouTube. And during the pandemic, we certainly saw that a lot more education went online, and we had all the homeschooling. We had people who had to also just learn a lot of skills that they hadn't learned beforehand. But probably the biggest thing that we also learned was and that I really saw, was a need for us to continue to work with educational institutions, and the need for us to be able to integrate with some of the learning tools that the kids are all using, because they are using YouTube, and there's a lot more that we can do to really help educators have YouTube be a key part of the curriculum.
My kids are on YouTube a lot, and sometimes more than I want them to be, and sometimes it's super productive and they're learning something cool, and sometimes it's not productive at all. How are you innovating to make the time that kids spend on YouTube more valuable and, of course, safe?
It's very important to me as a parent to make sure that we're giving parents options about what they want their kids to see. And that's one of the reasons that pretty much as soon as I got to YouTube, we started working on YouTube Kids, which is a separate app, which is important for kids in terms of how we can control the quality, and we can give parents a lot more control about what kind of content is appropriate for them and their family. And there are many other things, like we actually just came out with a supervised experience for tweens, because tweens was one of the age groups that was actually hardest. They usually don't want to be on the kids app, but they're not 13 to be on the main app, and so the supervised experience is something that we recently came out with.
The Wall Street Journal has been doing some in-depth reporting on Facebook. The report is that Facebook knew that Instagram was toxic for teen girls and didn't do anything about it. Does YouTube look at the impact it has on teen users, the influence it might have on someone's body image or self-esteem?
First of all, I think it's a very important topic, and we do have a panel of experts that we work with to be able to help us understand what are the different ways that our product could be used, or how do we face some of these challenging issues to make sure that we're getting the best advice. And we certainly do see, for a lot of really tough issues, that YouTube can be a really valuable resource. So body positivity, mental health, we see a lot of creators actually talk about mental health, and that for a lot of kids, it like destigmatizes and enables people to talk about what's happening and what's going on with them.
The potential long-term impacts of YouTube on teens and on children, whether it is toxic or whether it's addictive, is that something that you wonder about? Is that something that you struggle with, not just as a CEO, but as a mom?
we certainly want to make sure that we are doing what we can to be responsible with kids and in every way possible. And that's one of the reasons that we actually have worked hard to give parents as many options as possible for them to decide what is important for them and their family, whether that's like limiting screen time, like limiting what is the content they actually have access to. I mean, even letting parents just say, these are like the 10 videos. My kid can only see these 10 videos. And so that is really important for us to give the tools back to parents for them to decide what is best for them and their family.
Are you concerned about looming regulation?
There may be regulation that is well intended, but actually then has a really negative impact.
I would like to begin by addressing the heinous attack on the United States Capitol. Like all Americans, I am outraged by the violence, lawlessness, and mayhem.
How much did President Trump test YouTube, and how much did it test you as a leader?
Election integrity is something that we see incredibly important, and we've leaned into in every way we possibly can. We treat all public figures and all public leaders the same as we treat any individual. And so meaning that everybody is held to the same standards. And so we definitely held President Trump as we would hold all other presidents and all other elected officials to the same standards that we hold our creators and anyone else on YouTube.
But was that difficult for you as the CEO of the company? I mean, that's like a big responsibility.
I mean, yeah, it is difficult, but it is very important. And we also are global. So we're dealing with leaders from all over the world. And there were a number of leaders and there continue to be a number of leaders that post or that there's content that may be a violation of our policies. But we do hold a consistent standard across everything that we do.
YouTube was the last platform to ban Trump, and you have said his channel will be reinstated when an elevated risk of violence has subsided. How and when specifically will you make that decision?
Well, we'll make that decision based on a number of different factors, whether that is like events in the news, signals we're seeing from the government, and we'll certainly continue to evaluate that based on a large number of signals that we see.
And will he ultimately be reinstated?
I mean, we've stated that we will reinstate him when we believe that there is no risk to public safety or no public danger.
Google just removed a voting app for Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny. Yeah. The Russian government seems to be stepping up requests to take down content. You've talked in the past about your family history, your grandparents living behind the Iron Curtain, being concerned about censorship back then. And Russia is a huge YouTube audience.
Yeah.
How concerned are you about Russian government overreach?
One of the things that is important to us at YouTube is the fact that we do enable so many voices and that we do enable people to express themselves and really celebrate the freedom of speech. And we certainly, that's a core value of ours. But when we work with governments, there are many things that we have to take in consideration, like whether it's like local laws or what's happening on the ground. And so there's always going to be multiple considerations that we're going to have to take into consideration.
Navalny said that YouTube deleted a video, one of his videos. Was that at the request of the Russian government?
We certainly get requests from governments, and we look and consider why are we getting the request, what's actually happening on the ground, and based on a whole bunch of different factors, we make a decision. So we don't always, those are not always requests that make sense for us to honor, but in certain cases, we will honor them in that country.
The Biden administration seems to be targeting big tech. We've seen Mark Zuckerberg, we've seen Jack Dorsey now testify before Congress multiple times. And I've heard it said that YouTube is getting a pass. Do you think you should be up there testifying?
Well, I think we do get a lot of scrutiny. I feel like there's a lot of scrutiny. And because YouTube is part of Google, Sundar has testified a number of different times and answered many different questions on YouTube. So I do believe there's a certain amount of scrutiny. And if I were ever asked to testify, I certainly would go and testify as well.
You're one of the most senior women at Google, if not the most senior woman at Google. Google has faced a lot of scrutiny for how it treats women in recent years. How much progress do you think Google has made in hiring and promoting women across the company? And how much progress do you think still needs to be made?
I see a really big effort across technology as a whole to be able to be more inclusive. And I think that is really positive. I've been a big supporter of it since the very beginning. And I mean, I think at Google, there are many efforts and there's a lot of work that has been done. And I'm sure there's a lot more for us to continue to do. And if you just look at the stats, you can see there are not enough women. We need more women in technology. And I think we have made a lot of progress, but it's still hard. It's hard to be, it's harder to be a woman in technology. It's harder to be a minority of any kind. And so I think there's still a lot of work for us to do.
When we last spoke 5 years ago, I asked you about being a mom. You have 5 kids, and you said something that really stuck with me. You said being a mom makes me a better leader. I prioritize better. I see something growing fast, and I run towards that. If something's growing closely, I'm like, I don't have time for that. How has that management strategy played out for you?
I think it's played out really well. I think it's been, prioritization is everything when you look at it, because we have a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of moving pieces, very dynamic environment. So if you can prioritize and say, these are like the most important things to do, then you're going to get there faster.
Larry and Sergey have now left. How long do you plan to keep running YouTube? How long do you plan to stay at Google?
As long as I have a mission that I believe in and things that I'm excited about getting done. So I have a lot of ways that I see that YouTube can continue to grow. I have a lot of products and ideas and things that aren't yet released and things that we aren't yet doing. And I'm excited about getting those done. So I think if there comes a time where I no longer have a list of projects, where I feel like I don't have that much more to add, then it'll be probably time to do something else.
Would you throw your hat into the ring to be Alphabet's next CEO? Or if the board asked you, would you step up and do that?
Well, I think Sundar's doing a great job. I'm very pleased. I think he's doing, it's a very challenging job. There's a lot of different constituents and a lot of product, a lot of different issues. And I'll just say I'll always do whatever would be wherever I could be most helpful to the company.
Do you still talk much to Larry and Sergey?
I do still see them socially, though, not work-wise.
Do you ever talk about work?
Sometimes maybe casually, but our business is very complex right now. And there's a lot of things that are happening. And so it's hard for, people may have different opinions, but to really engage, it's a long conversation.
What do you want your legacy to be?
I am proud of the way that we've been able to enable people to have a channel, to have an audience. Like I just met with a number of three creators, and like YouTube really was able to let them shine and create audiences in a business and employ people that otherwise never would have happened. And so that's certainly one. Continuing to grow that. I'd say second, it's been really important to me too to see a lot more women in technology. That has been just a personal goal of mine, is to be a role model and try to support women. And I feel very fortunate to have gotten to where I have, and I know it was due to many different factors. And I want to support the next generation of women and see technology as an open place where anyone can come and be successful. And then probably lastly, continue to grow what we're doing with education.
Susan Wojcicki, CEO of YouTube. Really great to have you on the
Thank
show
you so
today.
much for having me.
No one covers the world like Bloomberg.
We have to get interest rates higher and bring inflation back to our target.
33 million people have been affected by this flooding in the monsoon.
Disruption is the whole point of a strike.
With unmatched reach and resources from more than 120 countries, the moment news breaks, 24 hours a day. Bloomberg, your global business authority.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Middle East. Our top stories this morning: the EU moves closer towards energy rationing as it prepares to set a mandatory target to cut power use, funneling energy company profits to struggling consumers could also be on the way. Investors count down to tonight's US CPI reading. The New York Fed says consumer inflation expectations have declined sharply. Dubai looks to raise $870 million in the initial public offering of the road toll collection system, Salik, the third listing on the slate this year. And Goldman Sachs is planning its biggest round of job cuts since the start of the pandemic, the surest sign yet that a chill is about to hit the street. Well, it's just gone 8 a.m. across the Emirates. Warm welcome to the show. I'm Manus Cranny in Dubai. It's been the bane of the Biden administration, the price of oil and gas at the pump. So when Morgan Stanley took a scythe to their estimate this morning, there was this moment when the oil market dropped. This shows you the skittishness and the nervousness. Morgan Stanley make it very, very clear that a renewed oil rally is not imminent from here. There will be no sustained rally anytime soon, and they cut their Brent forecast by $12 for this third quarter to $98. It's going to be $95 by the end of the year, down from $100. You're going to have a recession. Demand will pick up into 2023, but the structural issues will remain. Russia will decline materially. I want to show you what the United States of America is doing. The SPR, Special Petroleum Reserve, the largest weekly release ever. 8.4 million barrels last week. The SPR, this reserve of petroleum in the United States, is now the lowest since 1984. How much more can they do? Let me show you what's happening in the FX market. We're talking about a temporary dollar reprieve and repricing and a floor in the euro. Lots and lots and lots of notes. But it was the biggest one-day move higher yesterday in 6 months. So the hawkish narrative is building at the ECB. But standard banks say, look, they are not convinced that this is the start of a material uptrend in the euro. It's too soon to start talking about a Ukrainian substantial road path to some kind of change in the war. This is a long haul for Putin. BNY Mellon make the point. We've only seen 5 times in the past 20 years when the market has been this short, and it's nowhere near the extreme. So be ready for a more painful reaction. So that's the 5 days of the euro market. The bond market, there was an auction last night of $35 billion worth of 10-year paper. Yields this morning on 10-year notes, 3.33, down ever so slightly. The market choked last night. It choked on this 10-year auction. The bid-to-cover ratio was softer. But the real driving narrative of the bond market is that inflation expectations from the New York Fed have rolled over for the 4th month in a row. That is the point. Inflation expectations moving from unanchored, de-anchored, to perhaps something more tempered. And the 1 year ahead in 5 years is at 2%. Those are your markets. Jules is on tour, stamping up that passport. She's in Sydney.
I don't need a stamp when I come home, Manus, but we are seeing Asian stocks higher for a 4th session. Very much a risk-on mood ahead of that key inflationary data coming through in the United States. And South Korea really setting the tone today. We are seeing that market rally the strongest. Remember, it was closed yesterday for the Mid-Autumn Festival. But you're also seeing a boost coming through from a lot of these Apple suppliers on the back of the fact that we did see some strong demand suggested for the Apple 14. We are seeing a little bit of weakness, though, coming through in some of these biotech stocks, and that's as President Biden moves to set more manufacturing of those key medical devices in the US away from China. Let's have a look what we are seeing when it comes to the yuan picture. Once again, the PBOC coming back into the market and really trying to stem this weakness that we have been seeing in the currency with a 14th day of a stronger than expected fix. We are seeing some quite aggressive moves there to really try and stem this decline. And Bloomberg Intelligence saying, look, a weaker yuan may not do much to boost China's exports anyway, because US tariffs likely to blunt China's competitiveness amid this slowing global demand. And you have seen a little bit of weakness anyway coming through in the offshore currency today. Manus.
Jules, thank you very much. Juliet Sally with the very latest on the markets. So, to the European Union, they have set out their proposal, a mandatory target to cut power use plus measures to funnel energy profits to consumers. Let's bring in our reporter, Stephen Stupczynski. Stephen, the curbs on energy will frighten the pants off the average economist, but it is the windfall tax by another name that perhaps is the biggest headline grabber of them. Gas markets moved. Do you think that this is the building blocks for a more substantial repricing in energy markets?
I mean, I think that's certainly what the market is thinking about. You know, when you look at where gas prices have gone over the last few weeks, we had Russia totally shut Nord Stream last week or over the weekend before then, and the market barely reacted. Yeah, we saw prices jump up, but now we're back below that level. The market is currently pricing in this intervention, these price caps or this demand destruction, whatever you want to call it. They're looking at what the government is doing. And it looks like, according to the traders I talked to, that they really do believe that the European Union will come together and pull together some sort of policy or plan to curb demand. Now, what's it going to look like? It's unsure. You know, what we're seeing right now is there going to be a twofold sort of look at the demand reduction or the energy rationing, where you curb total consumption as well as curbing demand during peak hours for European countries. Not everyone is on board yet. And it will take a while to bring it together. Can they get something figured out by the end of the month? Will it go into early next month? It's unclear. But at the moment, it looks like when you see European gas prices fall so much, they are expecting some sort of deal to come through.
And Stephen, herein lies the point. It's about the dysfunction within the market. We had this conversation yesterday, which is, you know, we're using 1 year ahead energy prices in Germany and France. Barely 400 contracts are trading in some of these contracts, and the initial margins are monster. So what are people saying to you about transparency in this market? I mean, you've the Saudi prince saying there's a dysfunction and a difference between the paper market and the physical. On energy markets, what's the level of trust in the pricing that we're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're seeing the same thing when it comes to gas and power. The liquidity just isn't there. I mean, that's one of the things that the European Union wants to fix as well. They want to provide some loans for companies to be able to trade more, and that will kind of provide more liquidity across the whole curve. That could maybe bring prices down, could bring prices up, depending on what their view is. But these margin calls are enormous. Now, the thing is, it's not just the futures market that's dried up with liquidity. Physical market has also dried up in Asia, for example. People aren't buying and selling LNG like they were in 2019. You know, it really has dried up. So it's also challenging for physical players to figure out where the price is. So they have to look at the futures market because that's all they got. And because the futures market has these wild swings, it kind of feeds back into the future for the physical market. So there's this feedback loop, and it's detrimental. And it has a lot of people just saying, hey, I don't want to buy LNG right now. I don't want to buy coal. I'm going to go back to fuel oil. It's easy. It's dirty, but it's easy. And we know where the price is for at least for that in Asia. So it has become an issue for these traders and utilities.
Okay, Stephen, the dysfunctionality across energy markets is apparent. Stephen Stupczynski keeping us abreast of the latest EU initiatives in the energy intervention. Well, investors are looking ahead to tonight's US inflation report, and the hopes are that it may show a cooling of prices before the Fed's decision next week. Our global economics and policy editor, Kathleen Hayes, joins us. Kathleen, I want you to go under the hood, never mind that headline. Take me inside the core and how important it is that it stays set, if not a minute drop. What would that mean for the Fed?
The core is not expected in the consensus. Let's start with the headline and save that core for the suspenseful part. Because the gasoline prices is the big story for the headline, right, man? As everybody knows that. They were down 13%. That's AAA reported gasoline prices at the pump for all those U.S. drivers. Down 13% just in the month of August, falling for more than 90 days. So the headline then is expected to be down 0.1% in August after being flat in July. So that would be 2 months in a row of zero inflation. That's some good news. You see it right there. And beyond that, used car prices have actually started to decline just a little bit. The new car prices flat, maybe a little bit down. Again, a sense that things are moving in the right directions, and all that is good. However, the core, take out food and energy prices, and then what you see is rents, owner's equivalent rents. That's the rents you actually pay along with the mortgage payments that translate into something like rent payments. Those are going to keep rising. See these wages, 5.2% year over year in the latest jobs report, and being kind of canceled out to a certain extent by that 8.5% inflation rate. That's another thing the Fed's concerned about, moving into services prices and getting those entrenched. So when it comes to what this is going to do for the Fed's decision, probably they are still leaning towards a 75 basis point rate hike. Inflation's come down a little. It's a wonderful sign. And the fact that the New York Fed's survey of consumer price and inflation expectations have started to break down a bit, that's good too. They can pat themselves on the back perhaps and say, see, we've gotten tough and it's starting to impress people. But they've made it very clear over and over and over, they have to see inflation not just peak. They can't just see inflation expectations coming down. They need inflation to come down month after month after month. So we probably get the 75 basis point rate hike, and then it maybe gets a little more interesting going forward because nobody knows how much this is going to continue. And you never know on this one what gasoline prices are going to turn around, right? So it could be a slightly encouraging report for investors. I guess it just depends on how encouraging you find it that maybe things are starting to get better and the Fed is still going to hike aggressively for a while and start looking for a way to flatten it out. But at this point, I think we'll hear from Jay Powell that they are pleased with any progress they see, but they've done a 75 basis point rate hike and they're going to watch the data and see what they do next.
Kathleen, we'll leave it there. Let's see what the data print is a little bit later on. And of course, the market choked on that 10-year bond auction just yesterday evening. Meat-eating bond traders, Kathleen, they're nervous. We'll leave it there. Kathleen Hayes, keeping everybody right on the right side of the data in New York. Let's get back to Jules. She's in Sydney with the first word, headlines from around the world. Juliet.
Manus, King Charles III has vowed to uphold Britain's parliamentary democracy, marking a clear indication that he would stay out of politics during his reign. Speaking at Westminster Hall, Charles praised what he called vital parliamentary traditions, hailing the institution as a living and breathing instrument of the UK's democracy.
My lords and members of the House of Commons, we gather today in remembrance of the remarkable span of the Queen's dedicated service to her nations and peoples. She set an example of selfless duty, which, with God's help and your counsels, I am resolved faithfully to follow.
Employees in Beijing must now show a negative COVID test taken within the previous 48 hours to return to work after the Mid-Autumn Festival. It shaves a day off normal testing times as the city battles a new outbreak that's hit 3 schools. Officials say China Communication University will start online classes from Tuesday, and the situation at the other 2 schools is stable. Meanwhile, Japan has approved Pfizer and Moderna's COVID vaccines targeting the Omicron variant. An expert panel advised that Pfizer's shot be administered to people aged 12 and over, while Moderna's be limited to those aged 18 and above. Prime Minister Fumio Kishida says there are plans to expedite a booster rollout to prepare for winter. Japan joins the UK, US and Australia in endorsing Omicron-specific boosters. And lawyers for Donald Trump are fighting a US Justice Department request to continue using documents with classified markings seized from his Mar-a-Lago estate as part of investigations into potential mishandling of government records. A judge previously granted Trump's request for an outside special master to review the documents. The judge also temporarily barred federal investigators from using the seized material. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg. Manus.
Juliet, thank you very much. Still ahead on the show, the outlook for the Middle East. Banks amid shifting views on crude prices. We get the latest insight from Rasmala Investment Bank CEO Eric Schwartz. But up next, markets await the latest US CPI print. We'll discuss the potential outcomes with Lombard Odier's Stéphane Monnier right here on set. This is Bloomberg.
When I started, I had no idea it was going to turn into this, which is a tracksuit empire. I don't have any investors. All this is all money in. This is me going out and hustling, bringing that money back, and just building it. You gotta think about a person that was homeless at one point, didn't really have any money coming in. The fact that this person was relentless and just determined to succeed and not let rock bottom define him as an individual. I can take things and put them together and take them apart and make them better and put them back together. I respect the craft, so I don't want to minimize and disrespect the value of each step of the craft and do by machine what should be done by hand.
Politics to the world of business. Balance of Power with David Weston. News, analysis, insight from and about politics power players. Weekdays. This is Bloomberg.
Inflation may actually rise further in the near term. While all HICP components added to this high number, energy price inflation in the euro area is standing at close to 40%, illustrating the magnitude of relative price changes in the recent period.
The ECB Executive Board member there, Isabel Schnabel. Europe's inflation situation, the EU is moving towards an energy rationing programme, preparing to set mandatory targets to cut power use. That news saw European natural gas futures tumble at one juncture down by 9% yesterday, settling on the day down 8%. The beginning of a structural reprice in energy, or is that a false call? Stéphane Monnier is the Chief Investment Officer for Lombard Odier. Stéphane, great to have you in the studio, physically, finally. Look, when you see that kind of movement, some people are saying to me, look, futures have quite high illiquidity, but these moves by Europe, price caps, consumption caps, and a profit grab. Your first take on this trifecta of initiatives by Europe to deal with the energy crisis?
Well, I think, if the winter is quite mild, the European institution will be able to deal with this energy crisis. So it all, in the end, depends on the weather. But they are really taking it seriously. And the good news is that they have been able to replenish their, inventory of gas during, the summer. Now we are everywhere above 80% of the inventory capacity. So we are in a reasonably good shape.
Forgive me, Stéphane, but when I'm Irish, and if I'm going to bank on the weather for my investment strategy, that's a wee bit of a punt for me. But you have put the numbers around what you think some of the scenarios are on the economic slowdown, and on quite a measured way. I'm surprised that you're only going for a 1% drop in GDP in the EU over the next 12 months. Why?
Well, the reason is if this is a good scenario where we have 1% drop in GDP. However, it depends on the countries, and the various countries are at a different level of impact. For example, Italy would be more affected by the energy crisis. In the worst case scenario, you could have a drop in GDP of up to 5% for Italy. For Germany, you could have minus 2.8. And for countries that are relying more on nuclear, like France, you will have a drop of minus 1.1 in the worst case scenario. So that gives you a range, between, let's say, minus 0.1 and minus 2.7.
Okay, which, as you say, in the extreme, it's Italy. Now, how do we test the fragility of this situation? Will it be in the euro? I looked at the short positioning. It's in the GTV library. Let's have a look at it. It's nowhere near the extremes. I mean, we've had 5 deep pockets of short positioning in the euro. We're nowhere near extreme short positioning on the euro. Do we retest the downside on these scenarios you've just outlined?
Yes, I think we could go even further than the downside. We could go, down in the 90s, 93, 95, maybe, if situation gets worse. So I think that the euro has gone a long way in terms of weakening, but I think there is still margin for it to worsen going forward if the energy crisis, is not good.
Does something extreme need to happen to take me to 92, 93? I could have resurgent dollar strength. The dollar is utterly triumphant. There's a moment of repricing here. But to get to 92, 93, it's more than just dollar strength, isn't it?
No, it's also, of course, weakness of the economy, because if we put, restriction on the use of energy, clearly, the industrial sector will suffer in Europe, and that will compound with a bad consumer sentiment. So there will be an element of, I would say, disappointment in the European economy if the euro goes to that level.
When you talk about defensiveness in the portfolio construct, I've had some extreme calls. I've had people say, I need to have 50% cash. Other people said that that's a complete waste of the portfolio. Where are you in cash? And where would you like to be on deposits? Is it in dollar deposits? That's my natural assumption, but you correct me.
Your natural assumption is right. I mean, we will put the cash in dollars if we are given the choice. We are currently on a balanced portfolio around 6.5% in cash. But I think what is more important to us in terms of portfolio construction is to create convexity in the portfolio. So we are using option strategy in order to create an asymmetric return profile where we hedge the equity exposure in US or Europe with put spread strategies.
Is that expensive at the moment?
Not too much. I would say it's between 10 to 15 cents. So we are willing to spend 10 to 15 cents to protect your portfolio, because put spread, you are also limiting your protection on the downside. So that's something that we find attractive.
So the folly of mine in 1994 was to still believe that the bond market would not explode higher. And I literally was ravaged. That was 1994. Here we are. I find it interesting that you talk about a rate in the US of 3.5 to 3.75 as being restrictive but not destructive. I think that's what the equity market has shown me so far. And yet I had people come in now recently and say earnings will drop and this market can drop another 5, 10, 15% from here. So talk me through restriction versus destruction in the US?
Well, you have to think about it in terms of unemployment rate. If the Fed is able to hike rate to, let's say, between 3.5% and 4%, I don't think it will be destructive too much for the unemployment market in the sense that maybe the unemployment rate will go close to 5%. If it's not sufficient to I would say, kill the inflation phenomenon, then they might have to go much higher, maybe 5.5% in terms of rate hikes, in which case the unemployment rate will go maybe to 6.5%, and that would be much more destructive for the economy.
And in that case, then we see a much bigger hit on the equity story. Stefan, great to get you in town. It's amazing. Everybody's going to hit town now because it's getting a little bit less hot. And it's good to see clients. Stéphane Monnier, my guest this morning, Chief Investment Officer at Lombard Odier on the markets. It's time to spend just a little on your protection for the downside. Convexity is king. This is Bloomberg. Lovely.
COVID has changed everything. People are changing the way they work and the way they travel. Can you explain what you mean?
I think the world is never going back to the way it was fully before the pandemic. And one of the changes, I think, David, has been a change in how we work. Many people had a job at an office. They're not going to be required to come back to the office 5 days a week. And I don't think CEOs per se are going to determine these policies. I think workers will, because all of us CEOs, I think, want the best talent. And I think flexibility is going to be the second most important benefit after compensation. All of this, David, has culminated in Airbnb not just being a company about traveling, but now a company about living. So there's this whole new category of travel that's not classic 2-3 nights in a city. It's not long-term housing, and it's completely emerged because of the pandemic.
It's Daybreak Middle East. So when I was on the road in Switzerland, it was all about the wages for junior bankers with UBS and a number of institutions. But today, the most read stories on the Bloomberg terminal are the cull is back at Goldman Sachs. Doesn't matter whether you're a junior banker or a high-paid investment banker, the cull is back at HSBC versus pay rises. The cull is back at Goldman's, I should say, versus pay rises at HSBC. So what we know at Goldman's is they're set up to cut several hundred jobs. It's the yearly thing that they used to do, by the way. During the pandemic, they halted that. They've got 47,000 employees. It was 39,100 just 2 years ago. Trading, you saw the business surge by 32%. Investment bankers, probably a more worrying division to be in. Their revenue fell by 41%. Now, if you flick it over, I mean, two roads, two banks diverge. Pay rises. Ewan Stevenson caught up with Harry Wilson, our print reporter for HSBC. The bank is short of its cost target. There's going to be brutal cost control, but they may materially raise staff pay in 2023. So this is about retention of deliverers in the business. They may materially step up those staff wages in 2023 relative to 2022. But the bottom line for Ewan at HSBC, I love this, about the CEO wakening up and his commitment to cost cuts. And if he hears that every day, well, that makes him feel good as the CFO. I feel like we're in a good place. So two banks diverged. Pay rises anonymous at HSBC. And the cull is back at Goldman's. Equity markets this morning are a little bit frisky ahead of CPI. We're seeing the biggest four-day gain in stocks. We're just holding on to the green line this morning, 41.31, up 0.3%. The biggest four-day gain since late June. Why? Earnings, dear boy. Earnings will keep defying the weak economy, according to JP Morgan. Apple absolutely pumped it higher last night. Get out there and add to the orders for your iPhone Pro Max. I will. I look younger on that. This is Bloomberg.
No one covers the world like Bloomberg.
We have to get interest rates higher and bring inflation back to our target.
33 million people have been affected by this flooding in the monsoon.
Disruption is the whole point of a strike.
With unmatched reach and resources from more than 120 countries, the moment news breaks, 24 hours a day. Bloomberg, your global business authority.
On the David Rubenstein Show, peer-to-peer conversations, I uncover the untold stories of the world's most successful leaders. Watch Wednesdays on Bloomberg Television.
Bloomberg has enhanced search on the terminal to deliver what you need when you need it. Now, You can simply type phrases in everyday English in the command line. Compare financials. Find people. Analyze markets. You can enter phrases or ask questions. What do you want to know today? Ask a question or visit SearchGo to find answers now.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Middle East. On top stories this morning, the EU moves closer toward energy rationing as it prepares to set a mandatory target to cut power use. Funneling energy company profits to struggling consumers could also be on the way. Investors count down to tonight's US CPI reading. The New York Fed says consumer inflation expectations have declined sharply. Dubai looks set to raise $817 million from its initial public offering of the road toll collection system, Salik, the third listing in the Emirate this year. And Goldman Sachs is planning the biggest round of job cuts since the start of the pandemic. The sun sets and a chill blows across Wall Street. Let's get back to the Asian markets now, see how they're faring. Juliet Sally has the roundup from Sydney. Jules.
Hey, Manus. Well, we are higher for a fourth session, but I think one of our MLAV colleagues put it really well that we're kind of in a CPI sideways pattern as we await that key inflation report coming through from the US and, of course, what it means for the overall global economy. You do have South Korea really leading the gains coming back after that long weekend, and we are seeing a lot of support in those tech players. Also, China's market being well bid after its long weekend too, up 0.7%, and a little bit of strength coming through in the renminbi as we see once again the PBOC really try to defend the weakness of this currency. They set a stronger than expected fix for a 14th straight day. Bloomberg Intelligence, though, saying this weaker yuan may not do much to boost China's exports. Also saw Australia's consumer confidence rise for the first time in 10 months, but we've got Aussie yields down by around 4 to 5 basis points across the curve, Manus.
Yeah, it's a fairly determined PBOC, isn't it, Jules? Now, I mentioned Apple as being one of the big old movers in the broad index last night. Obviously, the new iPhone Max, it's out there, the orders are up. How does that feed through to the suppliers?
Well, Jefferies is saying, look, don't be too bullish overall on the outlook in China here. We did actually see 68% year-on-year increase in the number of people pre-ordering in China this iPhone in just 35 hours of pre-sales. But they say Apple's cautious pricing strategy suggests that it itself is worried about demand in China. The average selling price in China for the iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max models only up by 2% versus the prior model. And they also say, given the yuan is down around 8% against the dollar in the past year, Apple has effectively cut the iPhone 14's retail price by 6% in China. We are, though, seeing the Apple suppliers rally today, and that is across the likes of the Taiwan, South Korea, Hong Kong suppliers there. And the other interesting fact is Jefferies remaining fairly bearish overall on the smartphone market. And I think that's something we've spoken about before, Manus. If you're facing higher rent, higher gas prices, are you going to be spending $1,000 on a new device?
If I think it can make me look better in the old selfie, then you know the answer to that, Jules. That morning market wrap. Absolutely. I've got a producer here that tells me every day I'm looking younger. Can you imagine when I get the new when I get the new Max? Jules, I'll see you a little bit later on. Juliet Sally, keeping it real from Sydney. Well, Dubai is set to raise over $800 million from the highly anticipated IPO of the road collection company, Salik. It's the third listing on the Emirate this year. Simone Foxman has the details for me. So the valuation, how did it stack up to the initial thoughts of what we get?
You know, Manus, we had initially heard reports that Dubai could raise up to $1 billion from this IPO. Now we're getting a number that's slightly lower. You know, this could reflect what's been a dimmer outlook for IPO markets, even in this region, a region which started the year off hot as we've gotten some of this market turbulence. Yes, Dubai stocks are higher on the year and some of the better performers around the world, but, you know, investor angst is just this underlying concern. One thing that investors are also going to be looking at in terms of the prospectus, I was diving through that this morning. is how much road traffic Dubai has had. Because last year, road traffic was down about 15% from pre-pandemic levels. That even as tourists returned to the Emirate, as the Emirate was largely opened for business. And Salik not predicting that that number is going to get back to pre-pandemic levels until 2024 or 2025. So part of the rationale for this new listing is that Dubai is buzzing and people are there, and therefore there's going to be more road toll collection revenue. But perhaps Salik not standing up to see as much of an impact from this, even though Dubai is buzzing. But we will get the answer, the market answer to this question on September 29th.
Yep, let's see whether it's a nice old ramp up. Let's hope that it doesn't roll over. Simone, let's circle back to Turkey there, because the central bank governor outlining a liraization policy. What exactly is that?
Yeah, Shahab Kavcıoğlu, the central bank governor, really highlighting 2 points to this liraization strategy. One thing he wants to eliminate is what he calls currency substitution. So people moving their money into other foreign currencies, into foreign currency assets in order to protect their savings, protect their assets. That's one thing he's really fighting against. But the other is something that we're seeing some developments about recently, and this is loan growth. So we saw the interest rates on commercial loans, on personal loans really jump higher, even despite the low overall interest rate, just given the bank's concern for where everything was going with the economy. And that was concerning to businesses. So we've seen the government in recent days tease the idea of some kind of stimulus for loan growth. And that has actually helped depress the rates on those commercial loans over the last couple of days. And this also a facet of that liraization plan. Again, the running theme here has been that the government seeking to juice the economy, particularly ahead of elections that have to happen next year. One measure we're going to be looking at really carefully in trading today is our latest read on industrial production for July. This is a number that has consistently surprised analyst estimates. We do expect it to weaken slightly from 8.5% in the previous month to 8.3% in July. But this is something, I said, analysts have been really wrong about. So something that could play an important role in the markets today.
And never-ending story, but I take this one quite seriously, because this is the Secretary of State in the United States, Antony Blinken, now saying the Iran's latest contribution to the ongoing, I suppose, re-establishment of JCPOA in 2015 nuclear deal, their reaction has been a step backward. This doesn't hold much hope for us.
No, it doesn't, really underscoring how much less likely a return to that 2015 nuclear deal looks than it did even just a month ago. And Blinken joined by officials in the EU. In fact, France, Germany, and the UK called Iran's latest actions continued nuclear escalation. I think this really underscores the fact that this is unlikely. We're unlikely to see a deal before the U.S. midterms come November. That was an important date when we look at the U.S. political system, because there are a lot of folks there that are against this deal, even on the Democratic side. So that looks increasingly unlikely. But what we're going to be watching for, and where we could see developments, is an IAEA, the UN's atomic watchdog. They're having a board of governors meeting in Vienna this week. One of the things they're going to be discussing has been a key sticking point in a return to the deal, which is undeclared nuclear sites that had enriched uranium particles. Iran has been uncooperative in that investigation. But if we do see progress there, that's something that would bode well in terms of a deal, in terms of Iranian crude coming back to the market at some point down the road.
Simone, thank you very much. Great roundup this morning. Simone Foxman there at the Qatar Financial Centre in Doha. Well, let's carry forward the story on Salik. As Simone was saying, the details are right. Over $800 million is the aspiration for the IPO of Salik. Eric Schwartz is the CEO of Rasmala Investment Bank. Eric, good to see you.
Good morning.
So here we go. It's the third in a row. We've had TCOM. We've had DEWA. We can debate the merits of either in a moment. But here we are with Salik. Your first take on the hopes of this 20% stake. Do you think people are going to be queuing up to bid into this?
I think at this environment, yes, we do expect a successful IPO of the sole operator of the SALIC system in the UAE. One thing that is quite interesting is that, they have a very low CapEx. The payments out to investors will be 100% of the profits that they earn. So it's a very attractive asset-like model, which we think will garner investor interest, particularly in this environment. As we expect the population of Dubai to grow, along with the 2040 plan, the authorities are expecting a near 70% increase in population over the next, let's say, out to 2040. So we expect this as well to lead to increased revenue for the tolling system and for the investors in the IPO.
100% payout is that unique here?
I have not seen 100% payout before, but it's an asset-light model. As the traffic goes through and underneath the gates, most of those monies will be distributed to the owners of the SALIC system.
And I got to say, the traffic at the moment is fairly monster on a relative basis. Do you think? How important is it? I mean, we've seen some people line up for this, the domestic institutions, as it were, the Strategic Investment Fund, Dubai Holding, Shamal, and the Abu Dhabi Pension Fund. They're in for 606 million dirhams of this IPO, we understand. Are we at a point of where global institutions may nibble a little bit more on these IPOs, or do you think that they wait for the secondary market for things to settle down? You'd have done well in TCOM if you waited for the dust to settle, perhaps less so with DEWA.
I think mostly the interest will be out of the UAE. Mm-hmm. The government institutions, which you mentioned, will be interested in the high yield which is available on the security. And I think we'll see a fair amount of retail participation. Investors who are looking for yield on their investments with a medium to low level of risk. This is something that we expect to drive substantial investor demand into the IPO.
Now, we're never far from a bank on this show, are we? To be fair, we're sitting in the heart of banks. But when it comes to the debate between NIMs, you have qualified not just the growth in NIMs tonight. We may get an extra validation on another 75 basis point hike from the Fed. People are talking about 3.5 and 4% as the terminal rate. Now, qualify for me the NIMs expansion for me. I see that NIMs, the alpha in NIMs will be in Dubai relative, let's say, to some of the other banks.
Well, we think that the banking sector, particularly in Saudi Arabia, as well as the UAE, is well positioned for the current economic environment. There are several factors driving this. One is the expansion of net interest margins, which will continue to grow as interest rates increase. And we've seen a good expansion over in the first half of the year, both Saudi banks as well as UAE banks. We also are seeing good credit growth for the banks, principally driven on the back of high oil prices and confidence with respect to borrowers and their need for funding for expansion. And from these two activities, we do expect share prices to perform well. We saw the markets correct really between the kind of March and August period, along with global markets, after a very sharp run-up early in the year. Mm-hmm. So many of these opportunities, particularly with respect to Al Rajhi Bank, Saudi National Bank in the Saudi Arabia market, as well as ADIB here in the UAE, we think are good investments at this point in time for these reasons.
No risk of quasi-hard landing here? No risk of recession?
I don't think there is a risk of a quasi-hard landing here, or really even much of a soft landing. With elevated oil prices and the success that the UAE and other markets have had here with respect to managing through the COVID period, I think the region is well placed for solid economic growth and a relatively good business environment for these companies to operate.
And to be fair, JP Morgan's call this morning is a soft landing and no recession in the United States of America, despite Europe literally about to implode. In terms of bond positioning, corporate exposures, you look at the slightly shorter end, you're looking at DP World in 2023, and you still like the perpetuals from Majid Al Futtaim. So just run me through your thinking on some of these high grade, longer duration assets. I know the DP World is at the short end, but run me through your thinking on some of the bond exposure.
Yeah, so when we're investing our clients' money in the fixed income markets, we're very much focused on the areas of expertise where we have understanding of the credits of the underlying investments, as opposed to just taking, let's say, interest rate or duration risk. And DP World is a credit that is improving on the back of better economic activity. The yields on the securities, nearly 6% on the perps, are something which is interesting. Majid Al Futtaim, a retailer which economic activity and business activity is improving as well. These securities already have priced in any rising interest rates, or more than priced in certain interest rates, which we think is attractive at this point in time.
Okay, there's the list. 4 for 1. Better than Carrefour, isn't it? Or Spinneys. I'd say you're a Spinneys kind of guy. Eric Schwartz, Rasmala Investment Bank CEO, my guest this morning on the markets, right here on Bloomberg. Eric, thank you very much.